Order, order, and welcome to today's Select Committee hearing, the first session of our inquiry into science and regulation of hair and beauty. The committee often says that science is everywhere, it's all around us, it's part of our daily lives, and that's true in the case of beauty products and hair and nail salons. And one of what we are looking to do today is to hear from the charities and experts in the beauty and sector. Hair and beauty is a major industry. It's one that provides income to many female entrepreneurs. However, the chemicals involved are often powerful and they can be toxic, and it's important that its use is properly regulated and enforced and understood. We are very pleased to welcome an individual who has experienced the harm that a beauty treatment can cause. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today, Victoria. I'm going to hand over to Lauren to ask you some questions.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Victoria, for coming in today and taking time out of work to come and share your experience. I think it's going to be incredibly powerful and important for people to hear. So just to start off with, can you talk me through what happened? What happened?
Yeah, of course. Working in the professional makeup industry, I was aware of Botox, fillers, all of those things, and I'd started to have Botox, say 10 years prior to what happened, never had any problems whatsoever. Never looked overtly permanently shocked or fake. It just was a natural look, and I was never hid it at all. We went into COVID, and a lady that I knew from my village had said to me, my daughter can't come over from Dubai because of COVID had started, and I had this appointment booked for ages. The lady's coming to my house to do my Botox. Would you like to use the appointment? And to be fair, stupidly, I bit her hand off. I said, yes, I didn't do any research because she'd used her for a long time. I'd known this lady for years. So I didn't really think anything more into it. I went round her house. I did which was, I thought at the time was normal because of COVID. You wasn't doing, salons wasn't open, etc. Had to wear the mask and everything. Had to sign the paperwork as you did normally. So there didn't seem to be anything that would differentiate her from the professional that I'd always used. The difference was it slightly was more painful. I'm not really a wimp when it comes to having anything done. I've had a child; it's not a major issue. But it stung, which was unusual. But I thought, okay. Anyway, carried on, and my timeline, because it was a while ago, my timeline's not that brilliant, and I could check back later if you need me to. But within a couple of weeks, I started to get these dots, these spots, which there was 2 here and 1 sort of either side here. So I contacted her and I said, this is strange, because normally the effects of the Botox start to work. You don't go like, whoa, and you're completely like that. That isn't how it works. But you would have this, and it's a slow feeling. Didn't have that, but these lumps started to appear. So I contacted the lady and she said, oh, no, it's just, I changed the saline. Well, saline's not going to make any difference whatsoever. We all know what that is. So anyway, I carried on, and what then started to happen was these boils. Ooh. Okay, now at one point, the boils was the size of a £2 coin. Oh, the base of it then is filled with blood and pus. Sorry if you've just had breakfast. But it was a case of, now, some filming and things still had to go on. I'm a professional makeup artist. I can't even wear a mask because the mask is touching these things. And I can't be in somebody's face. Yeah, I mean, it was horrific, and they were so vile to look at. So I then spoke to her. She was very unhelpful, and she just said, you know, I don't know. I'm a single mum. I said, snap. I'm a single mum. Don't ruin my job. You know, I need to work. Woman to woman, I need to work. My parents was living in Cyprus. I'm on my own with a teenage son. And I was getting depressed. I was drinking because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I phoned my doctor, FaceTimed the doctor, and she said, dear God, what have they done to your face? You need the timeline, like the FDA, the prescription. You need anything like that. So I then managed to get hold of her supplier, who was a very rude man. And when I said I'd spoken to my GP, and this is what I need from you. Everyone has a prescription. Everyone has a story. You should be able to get to the base of it, whether it's food, drink, medication, whatever. And he just went berserk. Started calling me every name under the sun, put the phone down and blocked me. As I just said to Lauren, I've got all of these things. If it does help to tell a story for you moving forward, not that it's pinpointing a particular person, but you can understand the kind of people that I'm talking about. So then I started to have to go and have these things drained. At this point, the lady that done it got in contact with her original prescriber, who knew that she hadn't got this particular vial of product from her or through her. So then this really helpful lady, and I really can't remember her name, got in touch with Ashton from Seyi. And that's where the ball started to roll and the changes started to be made, because they started to help me. And they gave me steroids, they gave me all these different things. I spent about $8,000 at a private place having them drained, to the next day or the day after they'd filled up again. I then went to a place not far from here on my son's 13th birthday, had to drive there, where they'd had to cut each area out, and it was a 3 mil circumference, say all the way round, from each one, and then tried to stitch them with like a lumber stitch, which this one here tore several times. And that was the last bit of help they could do. They cut it out as much as they possibly could. If these people had tried to help me at the beginning, it possibly wouldn't have gone that far. But it did, and it went on for months.
Wow. Can I just ask you on the supplier front? So you were absolutely right to say that the kind of Botox injections are via prescription, so a doctor signs them off. So can you elaborate on when you called the supplier, did they have a prescription? No.
He was very, very, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, cocky, arrogant, dismissive.
We had no records.
You know, I worked in cosmetic camouflage for a makeup manufacturer, so I knew, like for the Ministry of Defence, I knew you have to be able to supply, you know, the health and safety data sheets. You have to be able to supply all of this information. I'm not an idiot.
No.
I might sound like one, but I'm not. You know, from his point of view, you know, you're a divvy makeup artist. Well, I know what I'm talking about. And he just was vile. And the lady tried to lie. I asked her to provide me with all of the information, and she actually said, I will ask for it once I get my next shipment because I've paid for it. Right? So these are the sort of people that you're dealing with. And if I was to say to you that any way that you could try and find these kinds of people, they are all on social media. I have received emails from this same lady who done this to me all this time ago about having fat-reducing injections, about vitamin D, or I can't remember, loads of things. Having blood taken out, spun round and put back in. There's all kinds of things that they do.
Yeah, wow. So you're saying, well, you're clearly implying that this supplier was on the black market, and this is a huge industry on the black market. So you then looked through, right, where do I report this happening? Did you go to the police?
No.
Where
I didn't, and Ashton said to me several occasions, you should go to the police. And I thought, look what's going on in this country. How can I go to a police station and say, Mrs. Stupid here didn't do her research, and I've had this happen to me? How do I do that? I don't know. I couldn't. And I should have. I know I should have. But where do you start with that? It's embarrassing. It's not. I've been on telly to try and stop this from happening to other people. Yeah. But the police, they've not got time to deal with stuff like that, surely.
I think they've got every time to deal with this sort of stuff because this is incredible. Yeah, it's affected.
It will affect me for the rest of my life.
100%.
These things I have to have injected. 50 injections per one with hard and soft fillers because the indentations are about this size, okay? And they have to use a scanning machine because of the main artery to fill them so that you don't have these big indentations on my face the whole time. And they last about 5 years. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. So these people that you've just described, these people are still operating and still doing, offering a service which is not up to standard. Do you think the standards are good enough at the moment? Do you think they should be regulated? Do you think they should still be operating?
No, they definitely shouldn't. And I think, you know, it's a bit like the whack-a-mole thing. You get rid of one, another one will come. Yeah. You know, and I think the only way is by having little spies, I don't know how else, to scrolling through the internet, starting the conversations. You know, I have been somewhere for Botox, which is a regulated person, and they said, well, you can have the proper option or you can have the cheaper option, winking, They know what they're doing. Yeah. They're selling the fat jabs, they're selling the things off the market because they're making more money out of it. Stupid thing to say it to me, you know, but they're everywhere. Yeah. And really, the only way is that they go through an aesthetics person in a shop through, you know, when you go to Save Face, where it actually says these are registered, regulated people. Mm-hmm. You can go to Brentwood High Street and have whatever you want done.
Yeah. And so you're kind of describing a secret shopper kind of approach. And
yes, absolutely.
What do you think the consequences should be or could be for those people that are deciding to choose less safe routes? Because let's face it, these things that they are injecting are clearly unsafe. I could have, honestly, and this is quite a brutal way to put it, I was ready to commit suicide. I couldn't leave my house. I was on mental health medication and I was drinking far too much alcohol. I didn't know what to do with myself. And with a moody teenager in the horrible, you know, it was February, it was his 13th birthday, it was hell. Yeah. And it did ruin my life. I'm back now, but it did. Yeah. And it might sound extreme to some people, but that's what my industry was, and I didn't want to do anything. Yeah. But going back to the original question, if you take away their stock and close their shop and strip them of any qualifications that they do have, because they don't have the right to keep them qualifications if they're pretending to do something that they shouldn't. Yeah. You know, I couldn't go on a professional makeup job without the insurance, without the qualifications, and work on a film set, because I would never work again, and it would be made. My name would be known. Yeah. I think it should work the same. Yeah. So I believe just looking over at time, the government have consulted last year on increasing licensing, regulations, those sorts of things. So it'd be really interesting when we look at those proposals and marry it up with what you're saying and asking for. I mean, is there a last question, I think? What's your big ask? What would you like to see change in order to stop this?
I know everyone's trying their best, and I do believe the secret shopper approach is the way. I don't see how else, because they're going to lie. They're all working from their back gardens. Yeah. You know, or they're going around people's houses. I don't see any other way to try and even start the ball rolling, and maybe the scaremongering will get them to stop. I don't know. Yeah. But stop it if you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yes, thank you so much for being here this morning, Victoria, and for your evidence.
You look fabulous, by the way.
You do actually. That's it. You do look fabulous, and we really appreciate your sharing your experience with us, because I know it's made an impact on all the members of the select committee here. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Order. Order, and welcome to this, the second panel in today's evidence session on the science and regulation of beauty and hair treatments. And we've just heard very powerful, moving and disturbing evidence from Victoria Lee as to her experience of beauty treatments. I think in common with many people, I knew about botulism and I knew about Botox. I didn't realise that they were the same thing. And that speaks to the level of scientific understanding, perhaps, of beauty treatments. Can I just ask each of you to introduce yourselves as you reply? And I'll start with you, Ashton Collins. What are your biggest concerns about cosmetic products and treatments harming consumers?
I'm Ashton Collins and I'm the director and founder of Seyi. Seyi is a national register of practitioners who are healthcare professionals that we take along a accreditation process to ensure that they are trained, insured and inspected for the treatments that they carry out. Our biggest concerns at the moment are the level of high-risk procedures that are being carried out routinely on the high street by people with no healthcare qualifications, and these are procedures that are quite literally costing people lives. So there has been one death linked already to a liquid BBL in the UK, and liquid BBLs are carried out using dermal fillers in very large quantities being injected into the buttocks and breasts of women that are causing complications like sepsis and infections. We've had a lady who had a cardiac arrest and went into kidney failure, was in an induced coma for a week. And these treatments are being sold on social media as being risk-free beauty treatments that you can have done in your lunchtime that have little to no consequences, that in actual fact poor Alice Webb lost her life in 2024 because of one of these procedures. And so we're now also seeing things like liposuction, surgical facelifts, blepharoplasties being carried out in people's homes by people with no medical qualifications. And so these are the things that should be tackled as a matter of priority, and we are heartened that the government are now taking action on that, and we're part of a stakeholder group to draft that legislation, and hopefully that will be imminent. But outside of that, and we've just heard from Victoria, what happened to Victoria was illegal. Yeah. She was injected with something that wasn't appropriately prescribed for her, and with something that turned out to be a counterfeit product. Now, it is illegal in the UK to import unlicensed and counterfeit medicines and use them on humans. It is also illegal for people to have Botox without valid prescriptions. So if you're having Botox, you should be seen face-to-face by a prescriber. So that would be a doctor, a dentist, a nurse prescriber, or a prescribing pharmacist who can assess your suitability for that treatment. And these two things are widely flouted in the UK, and the UK government and the regulatory authorities responsible for policing this legislation and these rules need to take these cases far more seriously than they do. Because we've seen with Victoria, she's using words like, I feel stupid and it's my fault, and it isn't. And this is an attitude, I think, that needs to change from the top down, because we see this when we encourage people to report these things to regulators and especially to the police. They are dismissed, they are sent away, and they are made to feel like silly women that have made stupid choices driven from vanity, and they think it's their own fault, and it isn't.
Thank you so much, Ashton Collins. You've raised a number of issues there, which I think the committee will definitely want to come back to. I do need to ask you and indeed all witnesses and the committee members not to refer to any cases where legal proceedings may be ongoing, and there are a number of such cases. So we need to avoid referring to them. But the points you make are very well taken, and particularly raising how this is seen, because this is it's women practitioners. Many treatments are researched by women scientists, and often, though not exclusively and increasingly not the case, though, it is women consumers as well. Seyi Falodun-Liburd, can I ask you what are your biggest concerns about cosmetic treatments, building on from what Ashton Collins has just told us?
So good morning to the committee. I'm Seyi Falodun-Liburd. I'm co-director of Level Up, and I am one of the leads of the No More Lyes campaign, which is a campaign trying to get beauty brands to remove cancerous chemicals from black women's hair products. And I'm going to be speaking mostly about hair relaxers today. I realise that there's a varying degree of understanding in the room about hair relaxers, so I'll try and give as much context as possible whilst being as brief as possible. So for generations, black women and children have used hair relaxers for several far-ranging reasons. Some do it to avoid racism and hair discrimination at school or work. Some do it because it's easier to manage, and some do it because they simply prefer it that way. 3 out of 4 black women in the UK have used hair relaxers at some point. And for most of them, hair relaxers are just one of those hair practices that's passed down from generation to generation, primarily from mother to daughter. Black women have historically spoken about the severe burns and hair loss that comes from using hair relaxers. However, our biggest concern is that an established and growing body of research has been linking the use of hair relaxers to serious health issues, including breast cancer, uterine cancer, fibroids, respiratory illnesses, and kidney failure. Having worked on this issue for the last 5 years, we found that gaps within the UK's existing regulatory and enforcement infrastructure, a lack of corporate accountability, and research disparities that are rooted in racism and discrimination leave black women and children unknowingly overexposed to dangerous chemicals that have life-threatening or life-altering consequences. I want to be clear that this isn't about telling black women what to do with our hair, right? And we don't support an outright ban on hair relaxers. This is about consumers being able to trust that the products on our shop shelves are safe to use.
Thank you very much, Seyi. And I should declare an interest there. Not only I am something of an expert in black hair products, having used a large number of them over my life, but also I was burnt by a hair relaxing treatment a couple of decades ago, and that is one of the reasons why I do not relax my hair anymore. But you talked about the other harms coming from relaxers. Could you just come from relaxers? Could you say could you say a little bit more about that, and particularly the scientific evidence, if there is scientific evidence, and if there isn't, why isn't there?
Okay, so I'm trying to be brief with this as well. Okay, so in 2021, Oxford University released research showing that the use of hair relaxers, including sodium hydroxide, was linked to a 30% increase in breast cancer in black women. Sodium hydroxide, which is commonly known as lye, is a heavy-duty chemical, and it's used to unblock drains, but it's also the active chemical in many hair relaxers. The UK Health Secretary Agency guidance on sodium hydroxide describes the chemical as highly corrosive, toxic and corrosive by ingestion, inhalation, dermal and ocular exposure. And the Health and Safety Executive classifies sodium hydroxide as a Category 1A skin corrosive, stating that the chemical causes severe skin burns and eye damage. But sodium hydroxide is literally just one of the toxic chemicals found in our hair relaxers. Medical research from France has found that hair relaxers containing glycolic acid is associated with acute kidney failure due to the buildup of crystals around the kidney. Nonylphenols, which are also used in hair relaxer manufacturing, they're a group of chemicals primarily used for industrial use, but alongside various cancers and endocrine disruption, those chemicals have also been linked to cognitive dysfunction, depression and anxiety, and impaired learning and memory. Also, this specific group of chemicals also has an effect at the transgenerational level, which means that even generations after the initial exposure are experiencing the negative effects of those chemicals.
Thank you very much. I said that I felt I was an expert in black hair products, having used them, but I was not aware of the nature of some of these chemicals, particularly the no-lye chemicals, which are supposed to be safer. And your explanation of some of the science, so if you like, how those chemicals are being used outside of the beauty industry makes me really wonder how the regulatory framework can make them safe for use. So can I ask you each just to say one thing that the government should do to make it safer, these products and treatments safer for use? I'll start with you, Seyi, and then Ashton.
Sure.
Just one thing.
Just one thing. Okay. So
most important thing. Yes.
I think we've got to start by starting to close some of the gaps in the regulatory framework, particularly when it comes to enforcement. I think there needs to be a real clarification of who is responsible for the regulation of hair relaxers, because at the moment it feels like black women and children are kind of falling through those cracks.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Ashton.
Yeah, outside of the issues that I raised in my previous response, I think one of the huge loopholes that we currently have in the aesthetic sector is the misclassification of how these types of injectable products are regulated. So at the minute, we've got fat dissolving agents and skin rejuvenation treatments that are being injected into women that are currently classified under general product safety regulation. So that means they are regulated in the same way as your ballpoint pens and your garden forks. And that means that the people that bring these products to market have no onus to demonstrate that the ingredients that they claim are in these products are exactly what's in them, that they are safe and effective, and there are no reporting mechanisms for when things go wrong. So thousands of women could be potentially experiencing harm from these products, but they are going undocumented and unknown, and nobody's being held accountable.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, Alison.
Thank you very much. Ashton, I did note Victoria's testimony, the help that you were able to give her, which was very welcome. And I didn't know that Safe Face offered that service as well. You also talked about how we have a lot of the laws in place, but they're just regularly flouted. And this idea of having licensed registers or registers may help that, but they are voluntary. Could you tell me a little bit about Safe Face and whether this register has managed to prevent harm?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been established for 12 years this year, and we're quite unique in as much as we are the only organisation that is a register that takes people through a 116-point assessment process. So we literally check everything on behalf of the consumer. So in the press, people are often told to do their checks, but the reality is the member of the public doesn't know what to check or how to check it. So we check their training, their insurance, that they have all the necessary policies, procedures, protocols in place to do these treatments safely, and then we inspect each and every clinic listed on the register to make sure the environment itself is safe and fit for purpose, that the products they use are sourced from legitimate suppliers and pharmacies, that they are stored appropriately and disposed of appropriately. And we take each practitioner listed on the register through a consultation process where they have to run our assessors through how they consult and consent each patient, explaining the benefits of the treatments as well as the risks, and most importantly, how they will look after them if something did happen. And only then can they go on the register. And that's our primary function. And over the last 12 years, we've helped over 1 million people find safe practitioners and have positive experiences with these treatments. But we also realised very early on that we were being contacted by people like Victoria who'd had these horrendous experiences that had nowhere else to turn. And so they were contacting us for help and guidance because the people that treated them blocked them. And so over the last 12 years, we've helped over 15,000 members of the public with various concerns ranging from unhappy outcomes right through to near-death experiences. And so we've made a real tangible difference. And alongside of that, what we also do is take the data and the information that we learn from patient-reported complaints and turn them into public awareness campaigns. And so our campaigns have resulted in a ban in under 18s from being able to access these treatments. And most recently, the work that we've done has contributed to the government agreeing to restrict high-risk procedures like the liquid BBLs to regulated healthcare professionals.
Thank you. In link to how you assess practitioners, do you audit them regularly to make sure that they are able to stay on the register?
Absolutely. Every year we do the same checks, so they're subject to and throughout we monitor throughout their accreditation period. We also gather patient feedback and we take on patient complaints, and if we have a negative review, those are managed as a patient complaint. So we monitor the situation as well throughout the year with patient feedback.
Oh, okay, thank you. There are concerns. There is another voluntary register which seems to be a bit broader. It's a joint council for cosmetic practitioners, and there are concerns that voluntary registers are of little benefit, as only the safer practitioners will go to them anyway. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think, for example, voluntary registration is a challenge in a way, because, you are hoping to attract the people that want to do the right things for the right reasons, not because they're being told to, but because they realise there is an issue and they want to act in the best interest of patient safety. And that's what we believe we've got. We've got over 1,000 members who have put themselves above the parapet. They choose to be inspected. They choose to be scrutinised because they care about their patients. And the challenge is, even with statutory legislation, where you have licensing, or for example in Scotland, where Healthcare Improvement Scotland regulates, without effective policing and enforcement, there are always going to be people that operate under the radar. And so, for example, Scotland estimate that there are around 500 people that should be registered with them but aren't currently, and it all comes back to that effective policing and enforcement, which for any government scheme would need to be bolstered up.
That is often the case. Enforcement is often an issue, and I did hear Victoria saying, what she would like to see in those cases, which was quite strong and well noted. If the government does introduce a register and licensing scheme, I'm quite interested on their sort of green, amber, red idea, and red treatments only on CQC regulated premises. What would they need to do, therefore, to ensure it works well?
Again, it comes down to two main factors, really. Is the first and foremost is effective policing and enforcement. So identifying people that should be part of these schemes and are not. And that is increasingly challenging with things like social media. So we investigate people that quite literally operate like ghosts. So they only operate on social media. They have no fixed address. They go mobile, so they come to your house to do the treatments. They operate with spurious names, like Amy's Aesthetics, for example. You don't know her full name. You've got no way to find her. And so when things go wrong, she can block you on social media, and you have no means of finding her. And it would be the same for an authority. And so that is the challenge in terms of how to develop a scheme that is robust enough to tackle these sorts of providers, so that we don't have an underground operation.
A final ask: how do you fund yourselves, and how do you afford to be able to do that and have the manpower or woman power to do that?
Much like CQC, we are funded by registration fees. So the people that join our register pay an annual fee to go through that process, and the work that we do in terms of members of the public, that's not paid for. So members of the public don't pay to use our services. It's the practitioners that join our register.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Alison. Great question. Can I just ask Seyi, how are you funded?
We're funded by philanthropic organisations and public donations.
Great, thank you. And thanks also, Alison, for raising the connection, if you like, with our social media and harms inquiry, which we published in June, which I think there's something the committee will want to look again in terms of misinformation and disinformation. Now, Adam.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Morning, both. Thank you for joining us today. This is an issue that came up in some of my constituency casework recently, and it's not something I was aware of at all, actually. So I'm really glad that you've come to us today. I had a really interesting conversation with Karen from KC Aesthetics in Long Eaton, who I think she considers herself a best practice practitioner. She provides training and has gone through as much training as possible, but she wanted to highlight to me quite how few people were doing appropriate training and all of the issues that we touched on. So I'm really glad that we've been able to raise this morning. But Ashton, in your opinion, do you think greater regulation of training of hair and beauty practitioners generally will help to address the harms? And are there any sort of downsides you see to increasing the amount of regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. Training is probably one of the most contentious and complex issues within this sector, because I guess, unlike any other sector, there are such a vast array of different professional backgrounds operating in this space. So you have beauty therapists, you have all manner of healthcare professionals, including plastic surgeons, nurses, doctors, dentists, paramedics, all sorts of things. So developing a qualification framework that encompasses all of those professionals and makes it a level playing field is incredibly difficult. And then you have, prescribing rights and things that are only applicable to healthcare professionals, and prescribing is essential not only for Botox treatments but also for the management of dermal filler complications as well. But I guess common themes that always arise in the analysis of the complaints that we deal with, and this should form a baseline, I think, for any qualifications that are mandatory or form a part of a licensing scheme, are things around consultation and consent. So there are always issues around those, and medical history and contraindications and all those sorts of things. Poor infection control, that's always a key factor, and aftercare and complaint management. And so having those core competencies could be transferable to procedure-specific training that makes somebody competent in the actual treatment that they are providing would be a great starting point to make sure that those foundations are solid, so that any treatments that they then carry out and do specific training in are then building upon that framework.
Real, thank you. And I guess following on from that, if you were to be designing a training program that you would consider mandatory for all practitioners, what are the kind of basic things that you would include in that training program?
So those things that I just mentioned, they would form core competencies in terms of taking people through a robust consultation and consent process, because especially in this industry sector, actually, consent is incredibly important, because members of the public don't see these treatments as being any way medical, any way risk associated. They think that they are everyday beauty treatments that have no consequences, and that is rooted in the consultation and consent process. They are not told that they can have things like vascular occlusions or brow ptosis or any of these things, which needs to be explained thoroughly at the point of treatment. And then over and above that, there needs to be a competency framework so that people can do these treatments safely and look after people when things go wrong.
Well, thank you, Ashton. A few more questions. Looking at what happens if things go wrong, and I think even with all the training in the world, we have to be aware of the fact that occasionally things could go wrong. We heard incredible testimony from Victoria earlier about what happens in those instances. In your view, if somebody is harmed, as we heard earlier, by a hair or a beauty product, or a treatment, do you think that there's sufficient support for them to complain? Is the system there to support them? And is there a method by which they can seek treatment and compensation for being harmed?
So from our perspective, the support that we offer is quite formalised. We triage every complaint that comes into us, and they're categorised by risk. And so we deal with those, and we take them through a similar process. We contact them, we see if they need any emergency medical treatment, and then we help them with their actual complaint. So we try to mediate that with their practitioner. So we get them to write letters of formal complaints to try and resolve that issue locally. We navigate them to regulators where appropriate. And I think the main thing that needs addressing is where there have been breaches in legislation, regulation, statutory rules, is that the support that they are given is very inconsistent. And we've long called for a task force, because what we find when we make complaints to these statutory regulators, oftentimes people that you are on the ground dealing with these things don't even realise that they have a responsibility or a remit to investigate complaints related to these treatments. And so we'd like to see a task force established that unifies and brings together representatives from all of the different statutory regulators that have a responsibility for policing this sector, to meet regularly to discuss these issues, discuss specific cases, to make sure that victims like Victoria are properly supported and the people that cause these problems are properly held to account.
Thank you, Ashton. I think that the task force is a really interesting idea. Seyi, I'm going to bring you in here. Is there any changes that you'd like to see consumers better supported if they're harmed?
Well, at the moment, from our experience of trying to engage with companies and regulators around this issue, there is like a real lack of support. I think when people do report harms or concerns, they're often met with responses that place the blame on them or an emphasis on mistakes that they've made, rather than seriously considering the dangerous nature of the ingredients in their products. So I agree around like a task force. I think that's such a good idea, because one of the issues has been around enforcement. Although there are a few gaps in the regulatory framework, like I've mentioned, that is only compounded by the lack of enforcement that's happening at the moment.
Thanks, Seyi. And final question for both of you, really. Let's hypothesise that we manage to solve this problem and regulations improve, and at home in the UK, things are improved. We are seeing a big prevalence of medical tourism at the moment, people going abroad to seek treatments. There is a world where we solve things here, but people just go abroad. Do you think that there's enough support in place for people who are being mistreated abroad? And is it placing an additional burden on the NHS now? And how do we foresee that getting better or worse in the future? Maybe Seyi first and then Ashton.
Actually, I'm going to pass it over to you if I should have a second to think about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, cosmetic tourism for plastic surgery is huge, and it's something that the horse is bolted on. There is no way of dragging that horse back in, I don't think. And, you know, it's an incredibly complex thing because, you know, these people are being sold this dream of you're having a treatment at the fraction of the price and you're having a holiday at the same time. And actually what we're seeing is, you know, hugely complex and dangerous procedures being carried out, not just in silo, but these people are going away and having 5-6 different surgeries at a time, and then they're being flown home the next week. And obviously one of those procedures carries a significant risk, but when you're doing 6 or 7, obviously those risks increase. And so when they come home, they experience problems. They can't then fly back out to Turkey or wherever it might have been. And so it does fall on the NHS to pick up the pieces, and there are no safeguards for the NHS to recover that money. There's no insurance in place for that to happen. And so there needs to be more in terms of establishing a framework between the UK and hotspots like Turkey, where governments agree on a set of standards that certain providers can agree to sign up to, have their clinics inspected, have their credentials inspected, and agree that if things go wrong, there will be safeguards in place. Because at the minute, people are just left to choose a provider. They don't know what they're walking into until they go abroad, and by which time we've heard stories where it wasn't as it was presented on social media or in the catalogues. It looked a bit dingy, red flags were going off, but they'd already paid, they were there for the week, so they went ahead anyway, and inevitably things go wrong.
Thanks, Ashton. Seyi?
So in the case of hair relaxers, it's slightly different because you're not going abroad to get medical care, but there are a lot of circumstances where black women are buying hair relaxer products from abroad, from America or South Africa, for example. And because of that, those products are not subject to the UK regulation because they're available from third-party resellers like Amazon or PAX and things like that. And I think there is some real work to be done to close the gap in people's knowledge around the impacts of a lot of these chemicals and the impacts that they can have on their bodies and their lives. I think there is people assume that products on our shelves, or if they're available to buy, that they're safe, and that should be the case, but it's not. And so I think there is a lot of consumer education to be done around how products, particularly cosmetics, impact us.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Adam. And I do wonder what guidance whether travel guidance for countries like Turkey mentions or reflects some of the issues, potential issues about, if you like, beauty or treatment tourism, and that's something that we can check. But now, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the very powerful testimonies. In fact, my questions follow on very smoothly from that last point about consumer awareness. And my first question would be to you, Seyi. In your introduction, you talked about how the sort of knowledge and advice is passed on mother to daughter and so on. We did a survey as part of this to get people's views on the issue, and of those who had been harmed by a product, almost 60% told us that they hadn't really been aware of the risks. So to some extent, I'm surprised by that, because what you've been describing is a kind of informed, I would have thought, discussion. Why is it you think people aren't aware of those risks?
That's interesting, because that survey that you've done falls in line with a piece of research that we did where we found that 77% of black women were completely unaware of the links between hair relaxers and cancer. And like I said, I think there are the very obvious harms that occur, the severe scalp burns or permanent hair loss, and those things are very much normalized as part of the process without people realizing that even those small things can have an impact on their health, and it can encourage chemicals to seep into their bloodstreams. I think that so there is a lot of conversation around the burns and hair loss, and that is a lot of the conversation that happens in the Black community, and it's about how you offset those kinds of things. The lack of understanding comes around the long-term effects around hair relaxers. I think people think that like the burns and the hair loss are kind of one-off experiences without realizing that there are long-term impacts happening without them realizing. And we're talking about the kinds of illnesses, cancer and fibroids, the things that usually take time to mature. And so people often don't draw the link between the chemicals that they've been exposed to and the potential illnesses that they may be experiencing.
It's really interesting. I mean, I think in this place we always assume that the government has a role to kind of, and I thought it was really powerful what you said at the beginning, you know, we're not telling people how to maintain their own hair. But is there a role for government in this? I mean, is there if government were to say things, would that have any effect? And if it's not government, who would be the most effective people to begin to raise people's awareness of the risks?
I mean, I absolutely do think there is some work that government can do around corporate transparency. You know, I think I mentioned that we at Level Up purchased 2 hair relaxers, and we found that on the packaging of both products, they were labelled as no lye, but then when we looked in the ingredients list, sodium hydroxide was listed.
Oh my gosh.
And so it makes it very difficult for anybody to make an informed decision around the kind of products that they're using, especially if they're not necessarily being told the truth about what is in the products. And so I think there is some enforcement that government can do around corporate transparency and really making sure that these products are being regulated and they're being investigated and concerns are being investigated and emerging research is taken seriously.
A similar question to Ashton, really, about public awareness campaigns. I mean, I say my feeling very strongly is it's the regulation and enforcement. But what more could be done, and who are best placed to do it to try and help people deal? One can quite see the quandary people are facing if they're being offered what appears to be a similar thing, but much which is affordable to them. How do we stop them being tempted by that?
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge, and I think social media has undoubtedly propelled the issues around that, because what you'll see is like those ghost operators that I mentioned earlier, they will be advertising cheap treatments, time-limited offers, that type of thing, and because these treatments are trivialized, like I said, especially amongst younger women who are more at risk to falling into unsafe hands because they don't perceive them as medical treatments, they perceive them as everyday beauty treatments, and obviously have less disposable income, so they are far more likely to fall into unsafe hands, and in fact make up 48% of the complaints that we receive year on year are 18 to 25-year-old women. But outside that, I mean, we do a lot of public awareness, and just last week, I'm not sure if the committee members have seen, but we did a 2-year collaboration with ITV News on a documentary that uncovered the dangerous treatments that are being carried out on the high street, like liposuction and liquid BBLs and all those sorts of things. And so we do try and permeate the media with these stories to create as much awareness as possible that cheap treatments are in fact too good to be true, and they will end up costing far more than you bargained for. But it is a constant battle to make sure that you are reaching the audiences that are most at risk. And I think the social media companies actually need to be held far more accountable, and the online safety bill could be much better utilised to make sure that these dangerous promotions are stopped.
I think it's a really important point. It touches on our other inquiries as well, because I think what you're saying is the traditional forms of advertising is regulation. And essentially, it is unregulated advertising, which is preying on people's vulnerabilities. I mean, I'm not sure. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that is what you're saying. But thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Danielle. I'm struck by the extent to which we don't seem to have meaningful research on the known research on the impact of some of these chemicals, which are incredibly powerful and are used in the chemical industries. We know that women have been under-researched. The typical subject of medical research is a white male in his 40s. Do you think how can we address? How can we help address that? Would you agree? And how can we address that? Sorry, Seyi.
Yes, I absolutely would agree. I think research disparities that are rooted in, for the most part, racism or discrimination or misogyny play a huge role in this, because speaking specifically about hair relaxers, black women are underrepresented, vastly underrepresented when it comes to medical trials and beauty trials. And this is an issue that sits directly at that intersection. It is a real issue, and I think more has to be done to compel manufacturers and corporations to actually invest in research around the impacts of their products and the ingredients that they use. I do think that should be a responsibility, and I think that they should be, alongside that, compelled to be honest about the effects of their products and then do something about it.
Okay. Well, we're speaking to some of the trade and the sector in the next panel, so we can raise that then. Ashton, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar point really, in terms of, like I said, with the injectable products that are flooding the UK market, there needs to be a reclassification so they are either medical devices and the government needs to follow through on its commitment to actually make dermal fillers class 3 medical devices, so that they all have to go through safety and efficacy trials. And similarly with the fat dissolving and skin rejuvenation treatments. But also, like I said, there needs to be like Seyi was saying, that it is a misogynistic environment. When people make reports to the police, we've had women who have nearly died, that in any other context, if they reported this level of assault to the police, those perpetrators would be arrested and held to account. But because it's under the guise of a beauty treatment, they are sent away and made to feel stupid.
Right, so that's really something that the committee will take on board. And it does sound to me like science is letting us down here, as well as the regulatory environment. Just one more question from me then. I think, Emily, we have seen a huge increase in the way in which beauty products and treatments target young girls and boys. Children. How is the regulatory environment responding appropriately to that when it comes to beauty products and treatments? And I'll start with Ashton and then Seyi.
Yeah, absolutely. And we recently launched a campaign calling upon the government and skincare manufacturers actually to change the way that children are now being targeted with potent skincare ingredients like retinols and acids. They are now seeing these things on TikTok and asking their parents to buy them, some of them which don't even realise that they're buying things that could potentially be harmful. And with aesthetic treatments, it's very much the same. These people are being missold treatments as being risk-free beauty treatments, as opposed to medical interventions that carry serious risk of harm and even death in some cases. And so, there needs to be a shift in that, without doubt.
Thank you very much, Ashton. And Seyi, young black girls have always been sort of targeted in terms of hair treatments, but are we seeing an increase in that as well?
Well, I think, just the fact that children's hair relaxers exist, right? Yeah. I think tells us that. And oftentimes the children's hair relaxers contain the exact same carcinogenic, endocrine disrupting chemicals that are in the adult hair relaxers. And similarly, they are also marked, a lot of them are also marked as no lie, having sodium hydroxide in the ingredients list. And so a lot of children, black children, are being exposed to exactly the same things that I mentioned before: cancer, fibroids, but also early onset puberty. And so we are, like I said, it's a whole product directed specifically to children, with brightly coloured boxes intended to kind of entice them into wanting the product. But it is an issue because it means that these children are being exposed to all sorts of chemicals and illnesses that them and their parents probably have no concept of.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Emily?
So I just wanted to expand a bit on the social media. You both have social media presences. I've been doing some work around women's health advice and how it's shadow banned often within the social media field. Do you feel that your messages are actually getting through and being treated algorithmically like they should be?
This whole Pandora's box. Okay, so no, in a nutshell, no. I don't think they are treated speaking specifically around hair relaxers, it is an issue that is rooted in race and in gender and misogyny. So I think social media probably does quite a good job of trying to ensure that that doesn't necessarily get through. But that means that we have to try more other ways of getting through to people, traditional media, billboards, TV, press, things like that, because the algorithm will do what the algorithm does, and it will decide whether or not your content will be seen. And I will say that social media has been brilliant for us in terms of getting the message across, but there also have been times where we can see that our content is absolutely being suppressed.
Thank you. Ashton, what's your experience?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because the algorithms are changing constantly, and I think for us, we're up against a constant battle where there are fewer people making noise about the safety versus the people that are promoting these treatments and targeting women and people with them with cheap deals and time-limited offers. So, the scales are not in our favour. So you have more people making that noise, and I guess, it's one of those things that if the algorithm could be changed in a way that if people are researching these treatments online, which we know younger and younger people are using social media as a tool not only to book these types of treatments but to research them as well, is that they are presented with safety information as well as accounts that offer these treatments. I think it would do far more good in terms of giving people an informed and educated standpoint upon which they could then go and seek a consultation.
I think that's a really interesting point, because there is blurred line between promoted posts and adverts.
Yeah.
Right. There's a real blurred post, and so often what is advertising looks like somebody's personal post, and actually it isn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know if either of you have experienced sort of reporting these ads when they are mis-selling or they are promoting things that you feel are not safe. What reaction have you had from social media companies to any reports that you've done?
Well, we met with Meta and explained our concerns about them, and we do report them, but I guess there are that many of them. And so, even within advertising guidelines, it is illegal to advertise Botox because it is a prescription-only medicine, but it is ubiquitous. You could walk down any high street in the UK and you'd see posters in the window, you'd see social media posts and things like that. And so, that's a constant challenge. And I guess picking up what you were saying, it's the paid-for posts, the organic posts that are just flooding the market. And I think the social media companies could do so much more to put filters on the content that people are able to post on social media.
Would you agree? Sorry, just last question. Would you agree with something? So they have the ability, with the way they do shadow banning, is they often flag certain terms for additional checks before allowing it through their moderation using AI, which I think we all agree is a very efficient way to do some moderation. Yeah. Would you think that terms like hair relaxers, Botox, should be subject to those additional checks?
Yeah, and they do those. Botox is part of that check for advertising because it is illegal. But for things like dermal fillers, liquid BBLs, and all it's a free for all. And for organic posts, there are no checks if it's Botox or anything. So it's the organic posts that I think they really need to be more effectively policed.
Yeah. And in our circumstance, so we actually are in a dialogue at the moment with the Advertising Standards Association, because we find that they are often parroting, the adverts are parroting the same mistruths that are on the packaging. And so we've been speaking to the Advertising Standards Association for about 6 months now, but the process is so slow. It's so long, and I think those kinds of processes haven't yet caught up with social media and the speed of the internet.
Well, certainly something that the committee would look to examine, and we have seen statements by Ofcom and I think the government with regard to making it easier to look at and examine the engineer the algorithm processes, and that's something we also bear in mind as we meet with the regulatory authorities and the social media companies in the future. But can I just say a huge thank you to both of you. You've really shone a light on aspects of the hair and beauty treatment and the science behind it, which I was not aware of, and the committee really appreciates your evidence this morning. Order. Order, and welcome to this our third panel in today's session, looking at the science and regulation of hair and beauty products and treatments. And I'm going to ask Lauren to open up.
Lovely, thank you. So we've had some really powerful testimony to begin with, and just really, how safe do you feel consumers of hair and beauty products are in the UK right now?
Which one would you like to start?
Whatever you'd like to start with, and then just introduce yourself as you start, and then how safe are people?
Thank you very much. I'm Meredith. I'm Director General of the CTPA, the Cosmetic, Toiletry and Perfumery Association, which is the UK trade association for the manufacturers of cosmetic products. And I know that today we are speaking about hair and beauty products and treatments. As CTPA, we represent the manufacturers of cosmetic products as legally defined. So that's what I'll be talking about today, if I may. Yeah. And I'm here to reassure the panel and consumers that cosmetic products must be safe. We have very strict regulation in the UK. The UK Cosmetics Regulation, which came into effect in the UK in 2021, because before that we were covered by European legislation, which has been in effect since the 70s, and actually the UK and the EU regulation is seen as gold standard around the world. Fundamental to that is that every manufacturer placing a cosmetic product on the UK market, whether that be for retail sale, online, whether that be targeted for consumer home use or professional salon use, has to be safe. And there are really strict protocols in place to ensure that. So the cosmetics regulation has chapter and verse of how a product has to be manufactured. So it has to be manufactured in a hygienic environment, it has to be stable, it has to make sure that it's not exposed to microbial contamination. And the product has to be safe. The regulation regulates the ingredients. It regulates the people that are in charge. There has to be an identifiable, responsible person who is responsible for the compliance and safety of that product. And that responsible person's name and address has to be on pack. And 9 times out of 10, that'll be a company, but it could be an individual. And fundamental to it all, the cornerstone of our piece, and something that we are very fortunate to have in the UK and the EU, is a safety assessment. And that is carried out by a qualified safety assessor whose qualifications are listed in the regulation. And that safety assessor has to look at every cosmetic product before it is made available for sale. And that safety assessment looks at all of the ingredients, how the product is used, where the product is going to be used, how often and by whom. It's going to look at if that product is a consumer use, and it will also covers professional products. And in that capacity, the safety assessor will look at how the customer is exposed to the product, and also the professionals, so obviously the repeated use. And that safety assessor has to personally sign in their professional capacity whether that product is safe or not.
A legitimate
Absolutely.
Products for beauty are
yes.
Lots
yes.
of regulation.
Absolutely.
So what do we think then, Victoria, if I come to you then, what's your role in making sure that legitimate products, well, we'll come on to the illegitimate products, are safe as well?
Of course. So I'm Victoria Brownlie. I'm Chief of Policy at the British Beauty Council, and we're the industry organisation that is essentially the umbrella organisation for all of beauty and personal care. So that goes for hair, beauty, wellness, nails, aesthetics, all encompassing, as well as consumer goods. So these two areas are areas that we cover from both sides, but the CTPA from a regulatory perspective are, Bible and verse, definitely the people that you should be speaking to on the technicality of regulation. Yeah. And in respect of products and services, it's two very different pictures. So as Emma's very well set out there, UK cosmetics regulation is some of the most robust in the world. Fantastic. That's brilliant for any products that are bought and sold here in the UK through legitimate sources. What we find, as has been discussed in the previous sessions, is that things that are coming through illegitimately, whether that be through fakes or through products which are created with bad intention, essentially, that organisations like Which point out all the time that can lead to causes for concern. And so that is an area where we obviously have have concerns about. And that then steeps into the area of professional services, which is another huge area around the need for regulation of professional services and the people that are providing those services. And there is a huge difference between the level of which we have safety regulations when it comes to products and the level of which we have safety regulations when it comes to services. And in the services sector, we've been talking about this since the Secure Review in 2013, and we're now 14 years on, 2026, and we're still kicking the can down the road. We've seen progress, but we still don't have that proper regulation when it comes to these services, which have grown so much in people wanting to have them, but also the technology and innovation and things that are available is so much broader now than even 2013 that we urgently need regulation in that space.
People regulation. Lovely, thank you. And over to you, Diane.
Thank you. So I'm Diane Hay, and I'm here representing HABIA, which is the Hair and Beauty Industry Authority. I'm their independent employer chair that chairs the steering groups of expert working groups that writes the national occupational standards across the whole of the hair and beauty industry. And that's a government-appointed organisation, authority, that actually does create those national occupational standards which exist in every industry. So it's very much based in terms of product production. It's more around the treatments and procedures. So it covers hair, beauty, again, the same areas that Victoria's alluded to with the scope of work that they do. And what that would actually do is write the national occupational standard for a said procedure. Quite often, we're asked to produce those as a result of safety concerns where there is no national standard. So in terms of that process, it doesn't denote who the person is that should deliver the service. What it denotes is what the service, the treatment or the procedure should have within to make sure that it is delivered safely and effectively. And they form the basis of qualifications in terms of regulated qualifications that are then used by awarding organisations to train practitioners in the correct process. That happens in Skills for Health as well as it does for HABIA. What we've got a collision of higher level services with higher risk, but equally lower level services can carry the same risks if they're not administered by somebody who is appropriately qualified, appropriately trained and insured in the right premises. A national occupational standard will give consultation process, it will give consent process, it will say what kind of environment that procedure or treatment needs to be carried out in, and it will also give the range of aspects that people would need to cover. So again, going back to the earlier panellists in terms of making sure that practitioners are trained effectively for all diverse client types in terms of both phenotyping and genotyping, melanin-rich skin, but also those with disability or life-limiting or life-changing conditions, so oncology clients with diabetes or menopausal treatments, and you will have seen a myriad of treatments in terms of that, but the National Occupational Standard forms the basis of those qualifications, predominantly for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and in England obviously we've got Skills England with a very similar process, and I also chair the apprenticeship Trailblazer group, which I've done since it was at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education.
Wow, they're complicated.
Yes. We did, during COVID, just as a sort of a view, I did 96 meetings on steering groups for national occupational standards with different experts. So there's an expert working group for every area, so hair, beauty, nails, spa, wellbeing, aesthetics.
Thank you very much for that overview. I'm going to ask Freddie to continue now.
Thank you, Chair. So I think my first question is around, leading on from Victoria, what you said around the need for better or more regulation. What, in your view, would that look like in order to better protect women from bad actors in the beauty sector?
Well, when we're talking about professional services, so we're talking about the red, amber, green consultation that took place in 2023, that's a great place to start, because at the moment everything, as has been previously discussed, is voluntary basis. So there are qualifications which, as Diane has mentioned, have been built, but there's also quick half-day training courses that you can go on to then start injecting somebody in your living room. And in the same way, the premises standards, etc., that are checks, the environmental health officers only have certain amounts of teeth in terms of what they can and can't deal with and actually take action on. And so what the licensing scheme would look to do is to introduce a scheme where everybody has to have a regulated qualification, their premises are inspected, they are only permitted to do certain treatments depending on where they fall within the red, amber and green, and there should be a certain level of oversight and supervision depending on what level of grade of a red, amber and green that they're offering. And similarly, there would be mandatory insurance and then a system of recording adverse incidents that were to happen. And what we've seen with what the government's announced towards the end of last year, which we really welcome, is that they're moving ahead with the red risk treatments, which are those higher end very risky treatments, can result in death, etc. As we've discussed, BBLs and cogs and threads, things that kind of go under the skin, and injectables into genitals and other areas. But arguably, in my opinion, more common and more prevalent treatments that generally come within that amber category currently, we're still waiting for any kind of government decision on that. That licensing scheme, all we have is yes, we're going to do that, but we don't have a timeline, we don't have any information around what the education and training requirements should be of anyone wanting to administer those treatments yet. So my concern is that we're moving ahead with red, but we really don't know where we're going with those other areas, which to me need to be kind of seen together if we're going to really be pushing to get this done, which I think we need to.
Thank you. I mean, so just to be clear as well, my experience of hair and beauty is pretty much limited to going into my local Space NK and asking for a bit of help for a gift. So it'd be really helpful to just kind of understand what procedures or treatments or products would be used, especially in those green and amber categories. I think we've heard quite a bit about what the red ones would be, but I think I would quite like to understand what green and amber would look like.
Of course. Well, there's the three levels are meant to be kind of low risk, medium risk, high risk, but even within that medium category, that's a really broad category at the moment, and we've argued that the level of supervision that you may need for something that's an injectable currently within amber is very different to somebody going in for a lower level kind of skin peel, for example, or micro needling or
mesotherapy.
Yes,
What's
or mesotherapy or a low level laser.
Yeah.
What was that last thing? Endotherapy?
Mesotherapy.
What's that?
So mesotherapy is where it is an injectable, so the substance is injected just beneath the skin, but it's not an injectable as in a filler or Botox, which would be more of a deeper subcutaneous type injection. And then we also have the intravenous injections, which would be vitamin infusions. So even within that scope of practice, you've also got microneedling, where that causes trauma to the skin and the natural ability for the skin to heal. So that's where the rejuvenation comes from. So in the category, you would have your microneedling in your green, you would have your mesotherapy and your subcutaneous injections in the amber, and you would have your infusions in the red.
Technically, when we say needle in that green, because I heard your response, Chair, they're actually also sold over counter.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
They are essentially a roller which has tiny pricks in it, and so that's what Diane means when she talks about the really low level of skin depth.
Yes, so the depths, and again, if we refer back to the standards that I was talking about earlier, the depths are listed, so things are capped. So that there's a cap of safety. So if we take a laser, you can use a laser or LED light for skin rejuvenation, but equally it could be used in an operation or diathermy or higher level risk. So the devil is in this detail of where do we actually cap these safety pieces, because a laser can mean many different things to many different people depending on your background, your job role, etc.
Yeah.
What sort of benefits do you think better regulation and more consumer confidence would give to your industry? Because I know it is a very valuable industry, and we have a number of premises on the high street in my constituency, and it's a well-used resource. So I think what benefits do you think would be brought to your industry with better regulation?
I think, honestly, the industry wants regulation. It's something we've supported since our inception. I know Habia and other organisations like Babtac do as well. And it's something that professionalises the industry. It shows that they are an industry that are female mostly 86% female-owned businesses, businesses where you have qualified individuals who are experts in their field, similar to Victoria talking about her expertise in makeup previously. There's a level of professionalism that I often think is disregarded in this industry. So what we need by a regulated qualification is almost that rubber stamp to say, yes, I've gone through degree level qualification to get to this point. Just because I didn't do it, you know, on a university campus, I may have gone through a level apprenticeship method, but I still have that degree of proficiency, and this proves it. And I think those that are reputable want that. Unfortunately, what's happened over the years is that we've had essentially cowboy training providers offering quick solutions to people that are taking these courses in good faith, thinking that that makes them a qualified individual, when the reality is talking about adverse reactions, things that can go wrong, and your ability as a professional to deal with those, even if the reason for it going wrong is nothing to do with the way that you've administered the product. It could be the person just has an allergic reaction, etc., etc. Different life events could have led to this. Your ability to be able to deal with those complications and understand skin anatomy and all of the various elements that Diane works so hard to build in as part of a qualification of what it should look like, that takes time. You can't do that in half a day. You can't do that in 2 days. That takes years of work. And so what we need by professionalising the sector is a way to say consumers have a confidence if they are choosing through their own autonomy and getting the right information and research and all of the information that should come as part of that to go and get these procedures. They can do that in good faith, knowing that they are in a safe pair of hands.
Thank you. I mean, just finally then, so how do you think the government and regulators can keep up with the ever-changing nature of the industry?
It's really tricky, and we've found even since the 2023 consultation that new procedures have come on the market, or there's been a change, we're no longer doing this, we're now doing this, and that is a challenge, and we completely accept that. Luckily, within the wording of the secondary legislation element of the Health and Social Care Act, where we have the ability to introduce this licensing scheme, the provision that's put in there is actually quite loose. It's laser and light, heat and cold. The wording is deliberately quite broad to allow for additional procedures and treatments to be added into that or removed as kind of things are phased out. But as was kind of spoken about before, you need technical working groups that can be continuing to feed in information around new advances that are coming in, whether that be the actual manufacturers and creators of these products and services, people like the MHRA, bodies like Safe Face, the Joint Council, ourselves, Habia, all of us kind of need to be around the table with government and DfE continually inputting into that so that we're making sure we're always kind of at the forefront of the new innovation as it comes in. We should be championing innovation because a lot of the time it makes things much safer. It's actually advancing things in a positive way, but we still need those checks and balances to make sure that we're keeping up with that.
Thank you very much. We heard earlier a call for a task force.
Yes.
Yes, would you support that call?
Absolutely.
Excellent, good. And can I just, for the sake of comparison, where would tattooing be in the red, amber, green?
Tattooing sits outside of the...
I know it does, but where if it was considered...
Well, again, it would depend on the where and the how, because the tattooing... You've got the tattooing as in tattoo artists in one sense, but you've then also got SMPU, so semi-permanent makeup.
Yes, so I know tattooing artists, would that be red?
So currently there's special licenses that...
Miscellaneous Provisions Act, it says.
Yes, sorry, under the Miscellaneous Provisions Act, which already allows environmental health officers and others within local authorities to go and search and check those premises and check the safety standards of those practitioners. So at the moment there isn't call for this to be included within the scope because there's already existing legislation.
So I understand that. I was just trying to get a comparison that people who are not familiar with hair and beauty might have experience.
It would sit in green.
Would sit in green? Okay, I'm not sure how helpful that was in the end. Alison, let's come to you. It's Adam, sorry. This is my fault, isn't it? It's Adam, sorry. I've been confused.
Oh, no, not probably.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. I want to look at the kind of fragmentation across the industry that you work in. I know lots of you have got expertise in this. Diane, I'm going to start with you, though. In 2013, I think the Keogh review that you'll be aware of described the sector as being highly fragmented. And the conclusion there was that self-regulation attempts within the industry had kind of broadly failed. Do you agree with that? Did you agree with that then?
I believe, yes, we are fragmented, but I think in terms of the work that goes on by some of that fragmentation is that actually the associations and industry organisations that are trying to take the bull by the horns and bring in some form of recognition. So, for example, BABTAC, Habia, Hair Council, NHBF, they all have professional membership bodies where you are actually, your qualifications are checked, you have to be insured, so on and so forth. What we don't have as an industry that I've obviously been in for I've been in a long time, been in nearly 40 years, is that professional recognition that Victoria was talking about, in terms of anybody who hasn't done what I've done can just open up anywhere tomorrow. They don't even have to do a half-day online training course. They can just open up and purport to be qualified. Yeah. And that, I think, is one of our biggest challenges, and that isn't something that all the industry bodies would support, in terms of, we want to see the professionalisation of what we do. If we're sitting in science and innovation, all of what we do is based in science. We learn anatomy and physiology from cell upwards. We learn contractions. We learn about endocrinology. We have both the anatomy, the building, but we have the physiology as well, as the how and the what, and what happens when it goes wrong. And when a guest or a client comes in and they've got a condition, we have to know what to do with that. It is heavily steeped in science. For every treatment we do, we've got biology, we've got chemistry, and we've got physics. We use electrical currents, we have to understand them. So again, people don't understand what these professionals, what us as professionals need to learn, know and understand to be able to deliver our jobs effectively, as well as being able to support with mental health, life changes, being a confidant to people when they're going through whatever they might be going through in life. So we've got a huge skill set, and it's hugely underrated and under-respected. So I think from an industry point of view, what we would welcome, both as an employer and also in the roles that I have, is that recognition that no, but you can't just open up. You do have to legislate to be able to say, if you want to open a business in this arena, you've got to at least register with your council. You've got to meet, you know, the legislative and the licensing piece. The licensing only really deals with what we would consider to be level 4 and upward qualifications. Level 2 is the entry point. And it also brings an awful lot of young people into employment as well. So when you look at what it serves to a community, you know, it deserves the respect of being recognised that you can't just open up. And we hear time and time again catastrophic stories of people being damaged and harmed, either physically or emotionally, or both, because we've got unscrupulous people want to make a fast buck, but we've equally got unscrupulous training providers who want to exploit people who think they're going to do something correctly, and they don't know any different. And I deliver apprenticeships in terms of people come to us with certificates, and I have to say to them, your certificate's not valid. It's not a regulated qualification. So in a funded education world, I can't allow them to go forward. They have to go backwards to go forwards.
So that comment from the conclusions of the Kia report, that the self-regulation had largely failed, safe to say that you agree with that? And
it has its challenges. It's got benefits, but it has its challenges, and we need something with stronger teeth.
Yeah. So I mean, the answer
with
is,
all of those organisations involved in a task force scenario.
Is it fair to say, since that was written in 2013, I think, that broadly hasn't changed, but what you see is the answer.
No, it has improved. It has improved, and again, we all sit round the table in terms of, with the DHSC, in terms of the task force for the licensing, for example. So in terms of creating the consultation, so all those members, if you like, of that group are all sat round that table.
Great. But the answer, I'll come to you in a sec, Victoria. I know you want to speak, but
sorry.
Just to say, the kind of call from your perspective is that regulation needs to come in and take the next step.
It's key.
Yeah, Victoria.
Because as much as all of those bodies exist and they do fantastic work, those people that are the problem, that are bringing down the reputation of the industry, are not being looked at by any of those people. And we know that this industry is growing year on year. The problem we have at the moment is that we have standard industrial classification codes that puts the whole of the hair and beauty industry within one code. So it is basically impossible to be able to split to tell you aesthetics has grown by this much. But we were worth £10.1 billion in services sector in the last year that we have data available, and that was a 15% increase year on year. And we know that the hair sector is in decline, and we know that the other sectors are increased nowhere near to the level that aesthetics is. So I would estimate the majority of that increase is coming from the aesthetic sector in terms of consumer spending. But I would say yeah, my worry is there is an underground here of people that, you know, they're going by mates, using mates. They don't need to worry about being licensed by such and such or whoever. What I also wanted to add to what Diane said, though, is that we as the council are still firmly of the view that there are certain procedures that should be medical procedures only. Yeah. And so there are even currently still procedures within the amber category that we as the council would argue, when it comes to those deeper penetration injectables, should not be being done by non-medics. Yeah, okay. And we keep pushing that with DHSC. It's a DHSC economic decision about whether they choose to put those within red procedures. But our position and the position of others like Babtec and others is that those injectables should not be being performed by non-medics because they cannot deal with the complications quickly and efficiently, and they don't have access often to the prescription-only medications you need to deal with that when they arise.
And final question from me, is it safe to say that you're all strongly of the opinion that we would like to increase training and sorry, I've lost my position there. Training and accreditation requirements on practitioners?
Yeah.
In terms of the training and accreditation is a different style of qualification. It's not a qualification. An accreditation generally in our world would be a CPD, and it's not a qualification. What we would call for is that somebody would have a regulated qualification by Ofqual regulation in England and other national regulators in the other devolved nations, or an apprenticeship, which again is regulated by Ofqual, or a degree awarded degree.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Alison.
Well, thank you. Earlier on, you were talking about the different types of treatment that would sit within the green, amber and red, and I was waiting to hear whether you'd mentioned Botox. I've been very unsubtly recommended that I should have it, but because it has the botulinum toxin in, and if anybody's going to have side effects, it will be me. I am accepting that I'm going to be wrinkly and droopy. But there have been confirmed cases of botulism poisoning across that, and I know the MHRA are looking into it, and the BBC did a very good undercover investigation. So I would like to know, we have heard about these harms that can be caused by unlicensed botulinum toxin injections. How serious is this problem really, and how should the government tackle it?
It is a prescription-only medication, so there is regulation already in place. But obviously, as we've heard earlier and continue to hear, is enforcement is a problem. We have got, as we've already said, we've got fake product, we've got incorrect product. Where it would sit currently, it is placed in amber, which means it would need medical oversight. But in terms of hearing from our from Victoria at the beginning of the day, she actually did go to a person where she thought she had been given a prescription. But because there was no face-to-face consultation with the prescriber, she didn't actually know that that product was not a real product. And part of the licensing conversation is that the prescriber holds that responsibility, whether they are prescribing remotely or they're prescribing face-to-face. And the call has been that the prescribing should be done face-to-face with the person who's receiving it at the time of consent and on every time of consent. So a prescriber is a medical professional, so that shouldn't have been able to happen, but it was an incorrect product at that point. It was the wrong product, and they are regulated by MHRA.
What we have found to date, and this is a loophole which we have hopefully closed last summer with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, is that up until last summer, a nurse prescriber could prescribe multiple prescriptions without having seen the patient to which that product was going to, and that in our mind is not correct. We completely agree with what Diane mentions there, that the person receiving the treatment should be the responsibility of the person giving that prescription medication. They should be asking questions and checking the suitability of that product in terms of the procedure, just as you were doing your due diligence about saying your allergic reactions, etc. The prescriber should be asking you all of that information. So there should be no blindness to this.
Does it sit okay in the amber category as is then provided the enforcement, or do you feel Botox injections should be moved to red?
Anything prescription only, I think, should be red.
Right, that's really interesting, thank you. And a side question to all of that, this is dealing with unlicensed products and the harms because of those, but there are risk of side effects even with licensed products. And people are talking about filling in the forms and everything. Do you take medical backgrounds of the people, and are there any contraindications that need to be taken with medicines and also with certain medical conditions that people have and chronic illnesses? Is there certain cases where Botox injections are not recommended?
Yes, in terms of a professional practitioner for any treatment, whatever level it is, you would always take a full case history of the person sat in front of you. You would want to know any medical conditions. You would also want to know if they've ever had any previous adverse reaction to any product, treatment, service, anything. You know, even at the dentist. If they come for treatment, we would want to know if they'd had any dental treatment for certain treatments. And I'm not talking high-level risk aesthetic treatments here. I'm just talking general beauty procedure treatments. So that is a part of your insurance. If you do not take that information, you can't make a valid treatment plan for a client who's wanting to receive the treatment. So in terms of your insurance, if you're a valid professional, you will have your indemnity insurance. That would be invalid if you didn't do that. And it's also written in all the National Occupational Standards and every qualification that is written. It's embedded within that.
There are indications sometimes where you go, I'm sorry, you can't have these.
Yes, and there's known contraindications to different treatments for everything all the way through.
So it should be in the case of Victoria when she mentioned that she uses another Botox provider now and they offered her a cheaper service.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I'm assuming they're a medical practitioner, because that medical practitioner should be registered with someone like the General Medical Council or others. Victoria could refer that to the General Medical Council. They would then investigate, and that practitioner could be struck off. The same can't be said of a non-medic, and that's why we can't have more serious procedures being undertaken by non-medics, because at the moment there is no recompense. There's no way to say that person then can't do the same thing the next day. They can just continue as they are. And that's
We've also got no central point of register for contract actions, adverse or otherwise.
Right.
So,
that's useful to know. Thank you.
Thank you. That is really good to know. And can I just follow up on that with asking, when it comes to derma fillers or fillers, which can be all kinds of substances, where do you think they should sit in the red, green?
Well, for me, dermal fillers should have been a prescription-only medication anyhow.
They should be red.
Yeah, well,
and they're injectables, so they should be red.
They've been listed as a device. MHRA have listed them as a device rather than a prescription-only medication. But a prescription-only medication would restrict who can actually use those things. And also, as you've just identified, there can be many different types of content, so you're not 100% sure exactly what legitimate or otherwise content.
So, and some of the they're used in all kinds of industrial processes where they have more regulation. Can I just want to? We've only got 10 minutes left. I do just want to pick up on a couple of points that have been made with regard to the call for greater professionalisation. One of the fantastic things about the beauty sector is that it provides opportunities for women entrepreneurs, women business women, women who unfortunately are not in the science sector to anything like the same degree. Now, in calling for the professionalisation, how can I just ask you, Diane, how are we going to make sure that we still have the pathways for women in particular to enter and thrive in the sector?
I was one of those women that came into the sector at 18. With all the stigma that went with it of, this is what the thickos go and do when they want to leave school. And that was said to me, and you fight your way through that, don't you? And so I am a business owner, I'm a training provider, apprenticeship provider, Ofsted inspected, etc. So I'm one of those people that has done that journey. And I'm grateful to my industry for giving me that opportunity. In terms of the pathways, we have occupational maps, which are on the Skills England process. So there is a way you can come in at the bottom and you can work your way all the way through.
What is that way? Sorry,
so you would go. You can do it as an apprenticeship. You could go into the FE provision. So you could go to college.
Go to college. So
but equally, there is a problem with that at the moment, which again we've lobbied for hard and long. The FE provision is currently 7 years behind the apprenticeship provision, so people coming out from FE are disadvantaged at the moment because the standards are behind. The T level was taken away. We now know we might get a V level, but that will take a couple of years. So there's a disparity.
Okay, and unfortunately we don't have the time to spend on that. That's something that we'll note. My other point to Dr. Emma Meredith, the beauty sector is £25 billion. That is actually, it's 1% of our GDP. It's a huge sector. I haven't got the figures for how many people it employs. Maybe you can tell me.
697,000.
Well, okay, huge employer. Shouldn't the sector be doing a bit more to protect consumers? Shouldn't the sector be setting up a task force? Shouldn't the sector be ensuring there's enforcement, secret shopping, etc.? Shouldn't you be doing more, given what an important, what a significant sector you are?
I would agree that we are an absolutely important sector.
Yes.
We touch everybody's
Yes.
lives. The MP has left. I'm sure that they wash and brush their teeth and they will use sun protection. We touch everybody's lives every day for our health, hygiene and well-being. And as I mentioned at the start, actually we are very well regulated.
I know you said you were well regulated. I'm saying, shouldn't you be doing more? Specifically, we haven't got very much time. Shouldn't you be doing more? Regulations coming from outside, shouldn't you as a sector be doing more, investing more in protection, in standards, in secret shoppers, in task force? Shouldn't you be doing more?
Personally, I don't believe so, because I do believe that companies do a huge amount of research and based on science. Our products are steeped in science. They have to do what they say they do.
But we don't know what the impact is on women's
I think
endocrine system, for example, straighteners and extensions. It's clearly that we don't know enough. So
again, with all due respect, I believe we do. So I think that the fundamental about our products are that we have a risk assessment. So I appreciate that we have lots of our products are based on chemicals, and chemicals can have very hazardous properties.
Yes. I mean, we've heard. I'm afraid you're not going to. I'll bring Kit in a minute. You're not going to convince us that there are no problems, because we've heard about problems. We've heard about products that don't have the proper list of ingredients on them. So just can I characterize your position then as being that everything is fine with the regulated sector? The issue is only with illegitimate operators. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I would, I have a concern about the cuts to trading standards. We've talked about enforcement. We work very closely with trading standards. It's so important. I'm not here to defend illegal and unsafe products.
But you do think that the sector is doing enough to save problems. Kit, did you want to come in briefly?
I just on the, obviously there's, as you said, there's a lot of basic research goes into the science, but one of the key concerns I have is about the impact of prolonged exposure. Right, so chemicals can initially appear, benign, but as they build up in your system over time, and how much research is there in? I mean, is there a kind of longitudinal study into people who've been using the same product? I mean, for full disclosure, I've been using the same moisturiser for 30 years.
It works great.
Kind of you. Well,
every brand's dream.
May I just say, it's great to hear that
so here's
using
moisturiser. The reason I've
moisturiser.
used the same one for 30 years is because they haven't changed the formula. It's I don't know if other products are available, but it's a Clinique moisturiser, and I wanted one that I thought would be stable, because once they start changing it, it mucks around with your... Anyway, but I often, when I put it on, think, oh my God, I've used this every day for 30 years.
Yes.
It must be building up in my skin. It's got an SPF in it, right, which is quite a powerful chemical when you think about it. Are the longitudinal studies into the impact of a slow build-up of... I mean, I'm sure if they, tested my blood, there would be traces of the chemicals in there.
So it's a really good question. Yes, the whole the point about our regulation and about the understanding and the safety assessment, it looks at the toxicological impacts, and not just our regulation, but we have chemicals legislation. So we have UK REACH, we have CLP, sorry to use the acronyms, the classification, labelling and packaging, and they look at the long term, the short term and the long term effects of chemicals. And also fundamental is the risk assessment. So yes, we have products that we may think have scary names or could be used in very hazardous situations, but the way that they are used in a cosmetic product, they have to be safe, and we have to look at the long-term effects as well of our products.
So there is monitoring, for example. There will be chemicals in cosmetics and others which at a certain dose level are fine, but
Absolutely.
above that are not.
And one of the...
So there's monitoring that if it's building up in
Yes.
my system to a dangerous level...
I mean, we would also say that
reassessment of that. The
Yes.
EU actually just did something similar around vitamin A, and they chose to reduce the level to which you can have a degree of vitamin A in certain products, and that's essentially a retinol.
Okay.
And then the UK will now, the UK will then look to most likely introduce a consultation to look at something similar. That generally is what follows.
That brings me on to my second question. Sorry,
We're kind of running out of time. We'll take your question and then Lawrence.
In the same way that obviously there's a lot of traffic from the UK overseas to get treatments that are not available here or are cheaper, is the traffic into the UK for things that are available here that aren't available that other countries ban?
Well, that would be illegal, because in order to be able to place a product on the market, you have to adhere to our rules, which, as Victoria said, are the most stringent. And this is the loophole if illegal products are coming into the market, and probably online
things
markets.
That we allow legally here, which, for example, in the EU they don't allow.
In some places. But again, it isn't about the actual service. It's about who does the service and what the licensing is and what the regulations
We're
are.
not using chemicals that are banned in other parts of the world. So, for example, we brought in a ban on microplastics, right? The little balls, right?
Other
That we don't have in other parts of the world. Yeah. But are there reciprocal? Are there things that have been banned elsewhere that we say, fine?
The UK and the EU are pretty much aligned because we are linked. There may be a slight lag if a decision is made at an EU level. But the UK and the EU are the most stringent, and therefore we would not be allowing onto our market products that in elsewhere they may be allowed. And also, just to come back to the MP who asked the question about keeping up to date, again, our regulation is fluid. So to your point that if there were any areas of concern and emerging sound science to show that an ingredient is unsafe, then we have the process in place that an independent scientific body, SAGCS, looks at a body of evidence that looks at local, systemic, long-term toxicological endpoints. And that independent body looks at that body of evidence and can say if that product is safe, if that ingredient is safe.
Let's hear how that body is doing in a specific... No, thank you, Kit.
Would you be able to give us an example about the gel nail polish? The likelihood of allergies and that kind of long term, so it means that if an allergy develops, then they won't be able to have dental fillings, joint replacement, surgery, diabetes medication, like hugely significant things, as well as the chance of developing other allergies.
Yeah, so we did actually.
Could you take that example?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that is a good example of where the legislation keeps up to date with emerging information and science, and we've worked with dermatologists on that. So there are obviously nail art and gel nails very, very popular, and they can be used at home and they can be used in a salon. And what dermatologists were seeing was an increase in allergic reaction. And in particular quite a lot of the gel nails are based on acrylates. And what the problem with the acrylates is that in order to be able to have the build-up nails, you put on a monomer, which is a very small substance, and then obviously you'll be aware. And then under the gel or the chemical process, it hardens into a polymer, which is the hard. And polymer does not cause allergic reactions, but the monomers can. And so the legislation was changed to ensure that the acrylates that were used were only to be used in professional scenarios, because of course it's very hard sometimes to apply things to our own nails, because then we get it onto the skin around the nail, and that was the exposure to increase allergic reactions. So the legislation changed, so only professionals can use those products. They will only be applying it to the nail bed when you're unlikely to get an exposure where you could have the allergic reaction. And also, again, we've worked very closely with dermatologists and hair and nail professionals to have guidance so that consumers and customers can ensure that they know what to ask for and the best advice to take, and to go to salons where they are applying things properly, and also for salons to make sure that they are obviously applying it correctly, but also using the correct either liquids or gel UV lamps in order to be able to ensure that the curing process is completed, because what you also don't want is polymerized monomers when people touch their faces, and then that's where you get the allergic reaction. So I think that's a good example of where the legislation kept up to date.
The lamp is usually as well.
Can I say, how long did it take? How long did it take?
That actually regulation that came in relatively quickly.
How long did it take?
About 1 or 2 years, that one.
I'm going to say there's going to be an awful lot of women and men with bad gels and potentially dangerous gels in 1 or 2 years. And I think we have a different understanding of what is quickly, and especially in a sector which is innovating and moving so quickly. We need to be able to respond more quickly than 1 or 2 years. Would be my view. But I understand it's excellent to have that as an example of best practice, but we want to see best practice moving more quickly. This has been fascinating. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I will just, if it's okay with you, ask each of you to say one thing either the government, your sector, the industry, or consumer groups could do to make a real difference to the understanding of the science and regulation, understanding effectiveness of the science and regulation of beauty products and treatment. So I'll start with you. Just one thing, one sentence.
Government should continue to support the regulator to ensure that the cosmetics regulation remains up to date, and that it supports the enforcers' trading standards in order to be able to get illegal and then possibly unsafe products off the market.
Trading standards.
I would want a commitment from the government before the next election that they will introduce a timeline for the introduction of licensing.
Great, thank you.
I would second what both ladies have said, and also in terms of you asking about do we do enough and could we do more. The industry organisations and bodies I referred to do have those processes, but they need to be given more recognition to support the regulation and actually assist the government in enforceability. And if you allow them to do that, they will absolutely work with you on a task force to make sure that we can professionalise the sector.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I actually had short, concise answers to the questions, and it's not always the case. And I should also note that it's been fantastic to have 3 all-women panels covering comprehensively the science and regulation of beauty treatments and products. So thank you very much for your evidence, testimony, and order.